Hello everybody, this is Becky at Springing Art. Thank you for being here today. The sunflower table is my entry into the challenge that Kathleen Osmore gave to her Patreon group. We had to create a sunflower painting of some type. No restrictions on what we did, just had to reflect a sunflower. So I decided to do a resin table, and use some of the live sunflowers that I have dried and been saving over the summer. This is a multi-step process. In fact, when I put all of the pieces into my editor, it was over 3 hours long. So I have just taken bits and pieces of it to try and show you all the different steps in the process. So this first step, I'm creating some acrylic skins to put on the back of the table. The blue sky is a variety of dirty cups that I poured and then did some bloom swipes on it. The green I wanted to be stripy so that it would kind of reflect maybe grass or the growing sunflowers. So I did some swipes, some short little swipes on that. You can see that there are a lot of gaps in the green, so I actually did another pour to create some more skin so that I would have enough green to fill in the entire table. This was, by the way, this was a 20-inch in diameter table. Here I'm just putting in some white to try and put some clouds, a cloudy effect kind of in there, because when I looked at it, I thought it looked more like an ocean than a sky. But people who've looked at it don't realize that until I say something, so I just keep my mouth shut now. And again, I'm just kind of smearing my white streaks out to make it look a little bit more cloudy here. And here is where I mix the different colors into my dirty cup so that I could pour out that next swipe. And I didn't include the swipe on here, but I think most of you have seen how I swiped before. And now we're finally getting ready to put the pieces all together. I used KS resin, and I've poured a very thin layer of KS resin down here. And I'm going to place my pieces on there. The blue is fairly simple. I've cut it to size. I did have to put a little tiny strip in between the green and the blue to get it adjusted. That I don't think you'll see that, but that happened. Here I'm just cutting my green pieces. It's not going to make too much difference. I plan to have this filled fairly tightly with flowers, so I don't think you're going to notice too much of a difference here. And now finally, I'm starting to place the flowers. This was a tedious process for a variety of reasons. For one thing, some of my sunflowers didn't have all of their petals, so I had to go in and glue petals on. Another thing, I probably would not use live and dried sunflowers again, because the sunflower leaves were very transparent in some places. They actually dried quite well, but when you put them in the resin, they're so thin that you can see something through them. And I think they would have been more colorful if they had been like silk flowers that wouldn't have been so transparent. The bigger problem, though, and this would have happened with silk flowers or anything else you put in, is air gets trapped underneath those leaves. So I spent a lot of time pushing down the leaves and rolling the little pick that I had over the leaves to try and get all of the air out from underneath the leaves. I'm going to just continue adding sunflowers here. I have sunflowers of all different varieties and from all different locations. They're different sizes, and some of them are quite thick. In fact, the one on the top right is higher than the mold itself, which is 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches thick. So it's a big sunflower. And this is, as I mentioned, a 20-inch in diameter mold, and it took over a gallon of resin to fill it. So it becomes pretty scary when you realize how much money you're putting into this mold. And you don't want to make any mistakes at all. I was trying to remember exactly how many layers I put into this, and I really can't remember. I decided to be very conservative and make the layers fairly thin because this is a large mold and a large volume of resin, and I stood a chance of it flash curing, even though I was using a deep resin that should have handled easily a half inch, 1 inch, or even more in a smaller mold. But because of the live flowers, if we got any heat to it, even if it wasn't a real flash cure, but if it just got a little bit hot, it would have burned the flowers. And you would have been able to see that with the yellow. It wouldn't have been so bad, but they would have definitely browned and not have been attractive at all. So I decided to keep my layers fairly thin. And I had planned to put my sunflowers in different layers to give more depth, but the sunflowers were so thick that they pretty much all had to stay on the bottom layer. I was going to try not to fill the mold all the way up because I wanted to try and not use as much resin. Because the flowers were so thick, it did end up getting almost completely filled up. You might notice that I keep pushing some of these sunflowers down. I only had a thin layer of resin in here to try and just hold them down, but they still wanted to float. They're very broad, so they just had a lot of surface area there to keep pushing them up. I could have waited till the resin got thicker, but this is a very slow curing resin that would have taken a long time, and I ran the problem of having it thicken up on me, and then I wouldn't be able to get all of the sunflowers in because this process did take over an hour. The other problem I would have had was if the resin was too thick, I would not have been able to easily roll the air out from underneath the petals without breaking or damaging the petals. As I said, they're very thin. Okay, in this fairly long gap where it looks like I'm doing nothing, I'm actually searching for bubbles, looking at it from different angles and different perspectives. The bubbles are terrible. You can't see them because they hide even in the cells and the lacing of the blue sky and under the petals, and so it just takes a long time to search them out. Here I'm getting a flashlight out to actually look at them and then poke a few more. They will make themselves known if you don't find them, and you won't see them now, but when it dries, they will be so obvious that you'll want to kick yourself. The sunflower layer has dried and we're on to another layer. I decided to mix some other little flowers in that I dried this summer because I saw several sunflower patches that had other patches of flowers planted in them. So I want you to notice though here the gap in between the blue sky and the edge of the mold. There's also a gap at the bottom between the mold and the green. This is because resin likes to move and it tends to move inward. And I think that it probably just pulled that mold in. I didn't even notice it until at about this point in time. And I'm continuing now to fill this section. This is my snow marker. As I said, I thought that this didn't quite look like a sky, and the snow marker allowed me to put a mark up there, make a cloud, and then you hit it with your hot air gun, and it clouds up and puffs up. And in 3D, it looks really quite stunning as a cloud. I have also used it for waves. So I finished the flower layer and I've put in another layer of resin going around the sides, trying to keep the bubbles from collecting on the sides, hitting it with the torch, being very careful not to hit my mold, and being very careful not to burn up my flowers. They're still exposed. They have some parts of them that are still exposed above the resin, so they can catch fire, and that doesn't look very pretty. Wish I could tell you how much time I spent looking for bubbles and using my toothpick and other little tools trying to get the bubbles out. So I accidentally deleted the clip which shows you what I found when this layer dried. There was so much foamy resin around the edges of the sunflower heads that I had to dig it out, sometimes with a box cutter, screwdriver, a variety of different tools. I don't think I drilled it, but I may have. It was pretty much a disaster to get it to the point where I could make this second pour, and this is going to go over most of the sunflower heads, but you can probably see that there are still the center, very center, has little frilly things on it, and they're still poking up. But it finally looks good, and now it looks bad. I had to sand it all down. As you can see, the head of that was sticking out. I didn't really have very much room left to top coat this. And there were flowers, other flowers that were sticking up as well. So it all got sanded and it got top coated, and here it is. You can notice around the edges, I didn't show a picture of this, but where that gap was, I filled the top in with blue. I filled the bottom in with green. In hindsight, I might have filled that in with black or probably with gold and painted the sides gold as well, so it looked like a frame. But I think it looks okay the way it is. I'm happy with it. I learned a lot of lessons from this one. I think primarily I would find a resin that had a much longer open time when I'm dealing with flowers so that those bubbles would have been able to come out and they would have released themselves. I would have not had as much trouble with them. KS Resin does have a deep pour resin. I was using a casting resin. A deep pour resin would have worked much better. My sunflower table is legless right now, but hopefully they'll arrive soon. I'd like to sell it at a Christmas market. Thank you for being here with me tonight, and please come join us at COZ's Patreon group. Good night.